Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Peace in Pieces, the Future of Israeli-Palestinian Relations Town Hall. This is a special edition of Conflict Zone coming to you from the Munich Security Conference. Our conversation will begin with the Palestinian Prime Minister. Thank you very much for your time this morning. And then we will open up to a high-level panel who will be joining us here on the stage. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh, thank you so much for joining us on Conflict Zone here from the Munich Security Conference.
Thank you for having me.
More than 28,000 have been killed in Gaza, more than 11,000 of them children, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Isn't it time for Hamas, which many countries around the world consider to be a terrorist organization, to release the remaining hostages and try and bring an end to this conflict?
By all means, all our eyes are focused on the sufferings of the Palestinians, both in Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. And what is immediately needed is a ceasefire. And what is more needed is to allow international aid to get into Gaza, not only through one single entry, but through all the entries that are there. As you rightly said, not only 28,000 Palestinians have been killed, but also 70,000 Palestinians have been injured. 281,000 Palestinian homes have been destroyed between partial destruction and complete destruction, but also 1.7 million Palestinians have been pushed out of their homes into one single geography that's called the Rafah area, and now the Israeli army is intending to encroach into Rafah. So all what we need now is an immediate ceasefire and allow international aid to get into Gaza.
Let's talk a little bit more about those prospects, because the PA President Mahmoud Abbas called on Hamas this week to complete a deal quickly, and I'm quoting here, to spare the Palestinian people suffering. Do you think that Hamas cares what Abbas and the PA has to say? Do you think they're listening?
Our president is the president of all the Palestinians, of course, and we do care for our people. And we would like to see an end to these atrocities. We would like to see the release of all the hostages, and we would like to see a deal that is there in the making as soon as possible, because every single day that is delayed, it means more killings, it means more sufferings, and it means more disaster for the people. When we call for end of ceasefire, of course we do mean it, and we have been engaged with all the international players, with the United States, with Europe, with everybody in order for us to bring this to a reality. We have been engaged with Egypt, we have been engaged with Qatar, with all the players who have been there. Of course, the situation is catastrophic, as you rightly said, and our president was very direct, very explicit when he stated that.
All eyes are on Rafah right now, as you've highlighted. There's been months of speculation that the Israeli invasion of Gaza could end with millions being pushed into Egypt. The latest reports are saying that Egypt is actually building a walled enclosure along the border. We heard from the Egyptian foreign minister yesterday. He said that they are preparing safe areas for refugees. Do you know what's going on there? Are they talking with you? Are they coordinating with you?
Yes. First of all, Egypt is not going to allow anybody to cross the borders. Second, you are right that
Are you sure about that? Is that going to hold? It looks like they're preparing something.
Yes, we are sure about that. Egypt is not going to allow Palestinians to enter into the Egyptian territory. We don't want Palestinians to move from Gaza into Egypt, even though there is an Israeli program to really push Palestinians out of Gaza in an attempt to rehabilitate Palestinian refugees into other areas. This is not something that is new. This has been there since 1954, when Israel wanted to create some sort of resettlement of Palestinian refugees out of Gaza. Remember one thing, 65% of our people who live in Gaza are of refugee origin. But the issue of the forced transfer that Netanyahu wanted to push people out of Gaza is still there. And having
Israel says that they won't do that, by the way. We've heard comments in the past days. They say that
we know what they are planning.
Where are these people to go? Because they are planning an offensive on Rafah. Or are you optimistic that that won't happen?
People should be allowed to go back to their homes in the north of Gaza. People should be allowed to go back to their homes in the middle of Gaza. The only way should not be out of Gaza into Egypt. The only way is that people should be allowed to go back to their homes, and people should be allowed to go back to their towns, to where they were. that now what Israel is doing is what one can call a cattle shoot exercise, pushing everybody into the Rafah crossing. That should not be allowed. I know, and we know, that it has been an Israeli program to push people out of Gaza. We and the Egyptians have been working hard not to allow this to happen.
The Israelis would, of course, dispute that. The Israelis would dispute that.
Well, the Israelis can't say anything, but also the reality speaks for itself. We know that this has been the Israeli program to push people out of Gaza. So the most important thing for us, the international community, is to push the Israelis to allow people to go back to their homes. This is the only thing that can happen. Not only that, but also to stop immediately the atrocities. Netanyahu has achieved nothing until now. He achieved one thing. He killed 28,000 people, he injured 70,000 people, and he destroyed 281,000 housing units. This is the only thing that Israel has achieved in Gaza until this single minute. That's where the situation is very dear, the situation is very serious, and that everybody should be responsible for holding Israel responsible for all the atrocities that it has been conducting in the Gaza.
Israel, for its part, says that it wants to avoid another October 7th, while Hamas has slaughtered some 1,200 people on October 7th. There's evidence of sexual violence, rape, mutilation. I mean, do you really think that they would stop until they feel that the threat is over? That they've regained some sort of sense of security?
The history of Palestine did not start on October 7. The Palestinian sufferings started in 1948. And this cycle of violence...
Let's talk about the now. We know the history. There's two different versions of it. Let's talk about the now and what happens going forward.
You are asking about now, yes. My duty is to make it clear to the audience so that the people understand the macro picture, not only the little tiny micros. Even though the situation on October 7 has been disaster, catastrophic for everybody, and we don't accept the fact that civilians have been killed. This is something that we totally don't accept. But we should not allow the cycle of violence every now and then to repeat itself. The Palestinian issue has to be settled. And now it is the time that we find solutions. It is not the time that we speak about processes. We are sick of processes. Now we have to go from the floor to the ceiling, and from the ceiling to the floor, i.e., no more processes. We need a recognition of a state of Palestine, and then we go into details. So the history of the Palestinian catastrophe did not start October 7. The last cycle of violence started October 7, yes. But before that, 67, 1982, all these sort of things, we need to put an end to this Palestinian suffering.
So then let's move then from the prospects for a ceasefire now to the prospects for a two-state solution, because I mean we've seen a huge diplomatic flurry internationally. We've seen Arab states, Israel's allies, including the US and the UK, make this big push now to secure a two-state solution coming out of this crisis. The challenges, however, to peace are vast. The Palestinian Authority, your organization, you're seen as weak and having legitimacy issues. Hamas is considered a terrorist organization, just carried out the worst attack on Israel in its history. Israel, for its part, has its most right-wing government in history, with a prime minister who is opposed to a two-state solution quite vehemently. Are you in a position to get a deal done? How can you tap into the international momentum when you have those conditions among the parties?
Let me just reflect on the points that you mentioned one by one. First of all, you are right that we are in a big position. The Israeli army encourages into our cities, into our refugee camps, in our villages, and the Israeli army has reoccupied every single part of Palestine, one. Second, the Israeli government has deducted substantial amount of our money, so we have not been able to pay salaries for the last 3 months. So, not only that, 700 checkpoints have been imposed in the West Bank, in addition to what is happening in Gaza as well. So therefore, when we speak about a weak situation in Palestine, you're 100% right. The Israeli army is not allowing us to function because we are under occupation. Wait a minute. Let me finish, because you asked me a question, so let me answer you. The other important issue is the two states. The biggest problem today is that the Israelis used to say about us, they don't have a partner. Now I can easily claim, back to your question, that we don't have a partner in Israel. Our president, all of us, have been extending our hands for the Israel to sit down and settle this issue. The other important, you have an international consensus on 2 states. Palestinians, they agree on 2 states, even Hamas. International community, the Arabs, they agree on 2 states, the Europeans, the Americans, everybody. We have been talking about 2 states for more than 33 years now. We need to move from talking about 2 states to implementation of 2 states on the ground. That is what we need now.
I want to talk about what you can do, though, because I mean, officials want you to start making some pretty bold moves right now, so that they have some flexibility when it comes to if a window does indeed present itself. Arab states, Israel's allies, they want, and I'm quoting here, a revamped and revitalized Palestinian Authority that can play a role in post-war Gaza. Abbas says that the PA is ready to take responsibility for Gaza immediately after the war. I mean, Palestinians are tremendously dissatisfied with the PA. We've seen the protests in Ramallah. 90%
The
of
protests were against the Israeli
want,
occupation.
90% of Palestinians want Abbas gone. 90%. 90%.
Wait a minute.
Does he need to go? Does he need to go quickly?
No, wait a minute. First of all,
how can you represent say that you represent the Palestinian people when 90%
do you
want
want
your
to ask me and wait for an answer, or do
Yes,
you want
please.
to continue talking?
Please.
So, wait a minute. First of all, we are very aware of the fact that we need elections. And our president issued a presidential decree calling for elections on the 22nd of May 2021, when Israel did not allow us to have elections in Jerusalem. So we were caught between the hammer and the hard rock. Shall we have elections without Jerusalem, or shall we wait until the circumstances allow? One. The other important issue, I do like the term revitalization of the Palestinian Authority that President Biden spoke about. And when I Googled it, I realized that it means bring to life. So for us, the revitalization of the Palestinian Authority, it means one thing. For me, allow us to function. Because when you have the Israeli army incursions into the cities, the refugee camps, then the villages, and when you have the settlers who are carrying arms, 22 Palestinians have been killed at the hands of settlers. Ben Ghafir and some other ministers in this current Israeli government have been distributing machine guns to settlers, not to hunt birds, but to kill Palestinians. Wait a minute. And then the most important part of the story is that when we speak about the Palestinian readiness for taking over Gaza, there are some questions that has no answers. One, Netanyahu's interest today is to keep the war ongoing.
This is not my question. This is not my question,
Mr.
Prime Minister. You've announced reforms.
Yes, but let me finish.
When are they going to happen, and on what sort of time frame? Because you have promised them before.
Correct.
When are they going to happen?
Correct. Netanyahu's war is going to continue until end of the year. Today in Gaza, we have 50,000 Palestinian civil servants who are there. Of whom 19,000 Palestinian policemen. We provide for Gaza $140 million every month. That's $1.7 billion every year. That's 35% of our budget.
Is Abbas going to appoint a deputy who has power, who has authority? This is what, if you can hold elections, is he going to appoint a deputy?
Look. The issue is not about.
Is he going to allow a caretaker, as we've been hearing? Many international parties are calling for.
The Palestinian Basic Law does not allow the president to have a deputy. Okay? We are people who are stuck to the law.
But it allows him to serve 19 years into a 4-year term.
No. All what we want is simply to have elections when elections are possible. We cannot have elections for part of Palestine without elections for every Palestinian. Now, let's not miss the point. The issue of Palestinian reform is something that we initiated. I myself presented it to the international community, and just to answer your previous question, we are implementing it step by step in full coordination with the international community and with full partnership with Germany, with the United States, with Europe, and with others. Now, let's also not miss the fact that in order for the ball to stay in our court, this is something that certain players who don't want to deliver political content, and then they throw the ball on the issue of reform. What the Palestinians need today, Maybe I should remind the audience and your people, the municipality of Nablus is 100 years older than the state of Israel. So therefore, Palestine is ready. We have the institutions, we have the capabilities, we have everything. Our serious problem is that we are under occupation and our people, they suffer, and your audience should be aware of the fact that the Palestinians are under Israeli military occupation and we need this occupation to end. It's not about reform, it's not about anything. It's about Palestinians, they're looking for one thing, that's end of occupation and establish a sovereign, viable, contiguous state of Palestine side by side the state of Israel. That's what we want.
We have limited time, and there's one more aspect that we need to get to here, because you have said that, and I'm going to quote you here, we should realize that Hamas is an integral part of the Palestinian political mosaic. You've called on them to join the PLO's political program. Where do you see Hamas's role? And do you worry that you risk alienating international partners who consider it to be a terrorist organization, Israelis also who are deeply traumatized by the October 7th attacks?
We all know that Netanyahu tried to buy quietness for money, and therefore he had a deal with Hamas. And also for us, of course, Hamas is an integral part of the Palestinian political arena. But in order for Hamas to be a member of the PLO, there are certain prerequisites that Hamas has to accept the political platform of the PLO, that we have an understanding on issues that has to do with resistance, and that we are calling for popular resistance and not anything else. And therefore, if Hamas accepts, and we have been in dialogue with Hamas before October 7 in Al-Alamein.
Are you speaking with them directly right now?
No.
Are conversations happening?
Not now, but Russia has invited...
So you still speak through intermediaries?
Russia has invited all Palestinian factions who will be meeting on the 26th of this month in Moscow, and they have invited all Palestinian factions. We will see. If Hamas is ready to come to ground with us, we are ready to engage. If Hamas is not going to come to ground with us, that's a different story. But we need a Palestinian unity under any circumstances.
But I mean, we're talking about Hamas here. This is, an organization that has a history of undermining peace through violence. They reject the Oslo Accords. They're committed to armed resistance against Zionism. I mean, look at the brutality of October 7th, where they slaughtered more than 1,000 people, took hundreds of hostages, the youngest being 9 months old, evidence of sexual violence, rape, mutilation. Does Hamas really deserve another chance?
Look, as I told you, one should not continue focusing on October 7.
They've been no friend of yours.
I told you at the very beginning that no way we accept any killing of any civilian innocent people. This is something that we should put behind ourselves. Under any circumstances, that we need to have a situation in which Palestinians are united, but again on our political agenda.
Is the PA so weak that Hamas is your only option?
We are not going to go to their ground. We want them to come to our ground. Our ground is very clear. 2 states on the borders of 6-7, through peaceful means. We have been engaged in negotiations for 33 years. Unfortunately, negotiations did not materialize in and into the conflict. We are now saying we need a serious paradigm shift from talks into a resolution that United States, Europe does recognize the state of Palestine on the borders of 6-7, and Palestine will be admitted as an independent sovereign state as a member of the United Nations. That is where, and then we are ready to go for elections. The Palestinians need to be under one umbrella. But, of course, as I said earlier, for Hamas to be a member of the PLO, there are certain prerequisites. If they can fulfill these prerequisites, ahla wa sahla. If they cannot, then it's a different story.
I would like to just briefly take it back to the situation on the ground. You're under a lot of pressure in the occupied West Bank, where there has been a dramatic uptick in settler violence. There's also been hundreds of millions of shekels withheld in tax revenue that Israel collects on behalf of the PA. You were talking about that a bit earlier. You've warned of the risk of things exploding in the West Bank, of impossible conditions, and how close are you to that point right now, would you say?
It's a very serious situation, because when people talk about the day after, we talk about the day after, not for Gaza only. We talk about the day after for all of Palestine. What is the point of handling issues in Gaza and things might explode in the West Bank, as you rightly said? Today, Israel is launching 4 kinds of wars against us. Land confiscation. There are 755,000 Jewish settlers who are living in the Palestinian territories. Most of them are armed settlers. 700 checkpoints, as I told you. A wall surrounding Jerusalem and separating Palestinians from Palestinians. And as you rightly said, Israel is deducting substantial amount of our taxes that Israel collects on our behalf. So the situation is very serious, and that needs serious handling. There are members in the Israeli government today who does not want to see us, not as a state and not as an authority. And that is where the problem is. The problem today, for the first time, you don't have a partner in Israel to sit down and talk to. When you don't have a partner, then there is no process. Therefore, you need a third-party intervention. Europe, United Nations, United States, Arab countries, to come up with a solution. And that has to be agreed upon in order for us to come from the ceiling to the floor and not continue trying to build walls that we have never reached the ceiling for the last 33 years.
Even before the war in Gaza on October 7th, the vast majority of Palestinians said that armed struggle is the most effective means of ending the Israeli occupation. We've been talking a lot about diplomacy here. We're here at the Munich Security Conference. But this sentiment among Palestinians, does it worry you?
Palestinians, they want a solution. We tried armed struggle from 1965.
They're frustrated.
They're very frustrated, of course. Not only frustrated, Palestinians are angry. Palestinians are frustrated. Palestinians are starving. There are 9,000 Palestinians are in prisons. There are thousands of martyr families. Israel has arrested 6,000 Palestinians since October 7 until today. Today we have 9,000 Palestinians in Israeli prisons, humiliated under impossible conditions. So therefore, they're not only frustrated, they are angry. Wait a minute, they are frustrated, they are angry, but they want a solution. If we tried armed struggle from 65 until 1988, it did take us to a certain extent. Then we adopted a different strategy, that we are ready to sit down and negotiate peace with the Israelis. It did take us another step. We created the Palestinian Authority. Now, this peace process is not ending the conflict. We need a serious paradigm shift in order for us to really end the conflict. That is where the Palestinians, my dear, listen to me. Jesus Christ was born in Palestine. We know what he said.
Let's not go back to Jesus Christ, please.
It is not
Listen,
with bread ones live
I want to
only.
know more about the mood of your people, and then we have to end it.
The Palestinians, they need end of occupation, and the Palestinians, they need to live free. This is where you end the frustration, you end anger, you end violence. That is how you end the conflict, by giving people their rights, is not by looking at cosmetic things. We need to look at the roots of the issue, not only at the symptoms of the issue. That is where, and the roots of the problem for the Palestinians is end of occupation. That is the name of the game.
Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us on Conflict Zone here from the Munich Security Conference. We appreciate it.
Well done.
All the best to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bravo.
Yes. If my producer can just come find me quickly. Hello, everybody. We're just going to get our panel set up. Right now, the stage will be changing around a little bit, but please don't go anywhere. Just please give us a minute. I don't have a clock. What time is it? Okay. Can you give me your phone? Hi, welcome everybody. Hi, how are you? Sarah Kelly, nice to meet you. Nice to see you.
Hello. I take any seat?
Sarah?
Yes.
Sarah? Yes, I think that it would be fair if I get enough time
Oh,
to give
my seat
answers
is over there.
to all these
You
things.
will. We're going to just.
There's a bit of Mac in there, but yes. So nice to meet you. I'm Mélanie Joly. I'm the Foreign Minister from Canada.
Ah, hello.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hello. Hello, sorry.
Sorry.
José Manuel Albares, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Spain.
Hi.
Hello.
Vas-tu? Ça va?
Ça va bien, toi?
Tu as été tout le week-end ici, non?
Oui, oui, je m'en vais au Brésil, là. Je m'en vais au G20.
C'est à côté.
Oui, c'est à côté. C'est à côté. OK, Ayman, Safadi, I'm here. OK.
He will come in 1 minute. I can start already. So everybody, I've been told the Jordanian foreign minister is going to join us in a minute. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to continue our conversation now with our panel. Again, this is Peace in Pieces, the future of Israeli-Palestinian relations, the town hall here at the Munich Security Conference in conjunction with Conflict Zone. We are joined by Tzipi Livni, former foreign minister of Israel. Thank you for your time. Ayman Safadi is going to be joining us in just a moment, the foreign minister of Jordan. We are joined by José Manuel Albares Bueno, foreign minister of Spain, and Mélanie, Joly, foreign minister of Canada. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for your time. And
Thank you.
As we wait for the Jordanian foreign minister to join us, Tzipi Livni, I'd just like to get a very brief comment from you at the beginning. Will Israel launch an offensive in Rafah, or will it listen to its allies and call for restraint?
Firstly, I think that it's a pity that Mohammed Shtayyeh didn't wait to listen also to what we have to say. And maybe the best thing for, I don't know, next conference is to have all of us together on the same stage. I don't want to enter into the blame game, but there are certain things that need to be addressed. And this is about history. Since he referred to 1948, so let's speak about it. Because in 1947, the international community in the United Nations decided on what is called the partition plan. 2 states, one is a Jewish state, Israel, and the other is an Arab state.
Again,
no, he spoke about history, and I mean, I cannot let this situation to be a distorted history. And therefore, since that day, unfortunately, at that time the Arabs, later the Palestinians, didn't accept the ideas of the international community. I was the chief negotiator for peace in the last 2 rounds of negotiations. They were quite, I believe, just solutions on the table that they didn't say no, but they didn't say yes. And I'm saying it because I represent those in Israel believing that the idea of 2 states for 2 peoples represent the Israeli interest. I believe that this, in achieving peace, it's not only about security, but also the way to preserve Israel as a Jewish democratic state. And therefore, it is so important not just to enter into a blame game, but to understand history and to try to reach a solution for the future. And last comment is that in Gaza, there was no occupation. Israel decided, hi, hello, Ayman. Israel decided to leave Gaza Strip. We dismantled the settlements. We pulled out our forces. We hoped that the Palestinians will use this opportunity to create something that their own people will be happy. Inside Gaza, flourish, and Hamas took over.
Just very briefly, just to kick off our conversation, do you believe, I mean, you've worked with Benjamin Netanyahu.
I believe.
Do you believe that there will indeed be an offensive that extends into Rafah? Just very quickly.
I don't know, but
yes or no?
Listen, this is a yes or no. I think that if our security needs are, and I do support it, to dismantle Hamas from its military infrastructure, and hopefully to replace Hamas with a more legitimate and pragmatic regime, the Israeli army will take the necessary step, including taking in consideration international humanitarian law as we need to. The absurd is that we called Palestinians to leave their homes not in order to expel them, but in order to save their lives because they are being kept as human shields by Hamas. And therefore the situation is complicated. Yes, there are Palestinians that are suffering there, but the real question is how all of us can lead to a better future and not end this war in Gaza as another round, because I was a minister in the Israeli Security Cabinet in the last rounds of operations in Gaza. One, we thought that deterrence would be enough. The second, we thought that any understanding with Hamas, I didn't support it because I think that Hamas should be delegitimized. But I would advise all of us to do what we decided on the first round of negotiations with the Palestinians, that it's not about blame game or history, but about finding a solution. And since you've mentioned Netanyahu, I'm his own political opponent for many years. You know, he tries to convince the Palestinians that Fatah and Hamas are the same. And my policy, my strategy for many years was to make a distinction between Hamas, because Mohammed Shtayyeh said that Hamas accept two states, but they don't accept the idea of end of conflict, which is more important, or it goes with it. And therefore, he enters into this trap. The only way to achieve peace is by an understanding that the choice is not between Israelis and Palestinians, but between those that want and are willing to take also, of course, political risks and other to achieve peace on both sides. And just entering to a blame game or calling the international community, give us a state, this is not helpful.
Ayman Safadi, I'd like to get your response, first of all, to what we have heard. Mr. Foreign Minister, by the way, welcome, and thank you for joining us. You know, we've been discussing all eyes right now really being on Rafah. Jordan and Egypt have been quite clear that they will not accept any forcible transfer of Palestinians. Egypt appears to be building an enclosure on its border. The Foreign Minister of Egypt addressed this yesterday. Do you think that your stance can still hold strong on this, given the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza and the talk of a military operation extending there?
Well, I mean, we should not be responsible for cleaning Israel's mess. And before I address that, we got to frame things in the right perspective. What we see in Gaza is a devastating war, mass murder, destruction of the livelihood of 2 million people, pushing people to the abyss, destroying hospitals, killing journalists, killing medics, killing humanitarian workers. And we've got to frame things in the right context. The root cause of all of this is occupation that has had no horizons of ending, that's being consolidated day in, day out. Look at the number of settlements in terms of the growth that we've seen over the past few years. Look at the situation before October 7. What did we have before October 7? We had a complete closure of political horizons. We had a government that includes radical racist ministers who openly call for the killing of Palestinians. They call them human animals. They don't respect their rights. And we had a process in which this Israeli government tried to sell the fallacy that it can jump over the Palestinian issue to have regional peace and ignore the Palestinians as if they do not exist. Look at facts and figures. What did we see before October 7? Look at the number of settlements, confiscation of land, suffocation of the Palestinian economy, encroaches on the holy sites. And the political narrative that was coming out of that Israeli government is one that closed all horizons. Even before October 7, this current Israeli prime minister was on the record saying that his mission is to suffocate the Palestinian people's aspiration for statehood. October 7, we all condemned the killing of Israeli civilians on October 7. All the Arab countries did that. But I have yet to hear one.
Israel have responded
I have
to
to
that?
yet hear one Israeli official condemning the killing of 30,000 people in Gaza. 75% of them are women and children. We're a country that made peace with Israel 30 years ago, but we made peace within the context of a broader peace that should allow for regional conditions that will ensure safety, security, dignity for all people, for Israelis and Palestinians. But Israel cannot have security unless Palestinians have security. We all cannot have peace unless the Palestinian people have their legitimate rights to statehood and freedom and dignity fulfilled. This seems to have been pushed under tons of layers of ignorance and acting as if Palestinians do not exist. So let's frame things right. We have a conflict. The root cause of conflict is an occupation that is a violation of every human right that exists. There was no horizons for this occupation to end. And now we're just looking at things as if the only problem is that there is something called Hamas. No, the only problem is that there is an occupation that has to end. We in the Arab world since 2002 have said that we're willing to have full normal ties with Israel in return for ending the occupation and the realization of a Palestinian state. Israel did not even consider that. And this is the question that we have. On the issue of displacement, it's an absolute no. We will not allow for the displacement of another thousands of Palestinians.
Is that also what your Egyptian counterparts are saying?
Yes, I think Jordan and Egypt have been
even despite the building of the enclosure?
About that displacement is not acceptable. It's a violation of international law. It's a war crime. But beyond that, it will solve nothing. It will just set the stage for further conflict. One last sentence. Whoever wants peace, we cannot just keep speaking in the macro. The path to peace is known, the two-state solution, the realization of a Palestinian state that can live in peace and security with Israel. Every other talk about political horizon or about peace is, I'm sorry, it's ignoring the issue and it's assuming that you can continue to control the life of 5 million people and deny them every human right and say, I want peace. How is that possible?
I'd like to turn to the Spanish foreign minister right now and get the EU's and the Spanish views here because you are among the EU countries most critical of the rising death toll in Gaza and Israel's operation there. You have paused arms sales, we understand. How do you see the prospects for de-escalation and ending the conflict?
Everything that we are doing and saying aims at de-escalation. This escalation of violence will lead nowhere. I don't see any political vision behind all this violence. And there is a real risk of a spillover beyond Gaza. We see what's going on in the West Bank. We are very, very worried for a very fragile already Lebanon. So basically, I think we all know what is needed to get peace and security for both the Palestinian people and the Israeli people. We take very seriously the security concerns of Israel. When we call for a permanent ceasefire, when we call for the immediate entrance of humanitarian aid, which is absolutely needed in Gaza, given the catastrophic humanitarian situation, when we call for the immediate release of hostages, all those things are and go in the benefit of both of them, the Palestinians and the Israeli.
But there's a lot of tension right now between Spain and Israel. I mean, they withdrew their ambassador.
I will address that. Several times in history, both the Israelis and the Palestinians have agreed about the two-state solution, the real implementation, a Palestinian state. We all know that that's the real formula that will bring peace and security for both of them. So let's seize this tragic opportunity and let's make it. And that's the sense of our peace conference. Israel is a friend of Spain. Nothing of what we say or what we do goes against Israel. So our relationship, we try them to be as good as they have always been. But we are not lower our voice in the defense of the civilian Palestinians.
Mélanie, Joly, I'd like to turn to you, Foreign Minister of Canada, and perhaps you can also give us the international perspective as well as maybe the North American perspective as well. How much influence do you see the international community having on bringing an end to this conflict? And should countries be taking tougher action, bringing tougher pressure to bear, for example, things like what the Spanish are doing with pausing arms shipments, for example?
Well, I'll give you what I'm seeing at the international level, and now my new best friend is Ayman because we speak to each other even on St. Valentine's night. But also I'm in contact, and I was in contact with President Herzog yesterday. I'll tell you the international community vision and at the same time Canada's point of view. So Sarah, what we need now is a hostage deal. We need that because that's the only way that we can get humanitarian support up to 500 trucks a day from Karam Salem and Rafah. And from there, there will be a momentum to get to a sustainable ceasefire. Violence must stop. I think we all agree on that. And when we had the last truce in November, we saw that things calmed down. The pressure in all our countries calmed down. I must say, in Canada, the politics of this is extremely difficult. And that's creating tensions, more anti-Semitism, more Islamophobia. There's lots of tensions in our community. So what we want is a hostage deal. It's a humanitarian aid. This will then permit the work on a grand bargain, which is, for too long, we've been thinking, and particularly the left, center left, which I'm from, we believe in a two-state solution.
But
and wait, let me just finish and I'll get to. So we believe in a two-state solution. And then the right was much more into normalization of relationship with Israel. Let's make sure that there's a security apparatus for the region. But the reality, Sarah, right now is we have an opportunity to bring long-lasting peace to the region. Why? Because we have to put the two together. There will be no security for the Arab world and for Israel if there's no normalization, a deal with Saudi Arabia, and a two-state solution.
What more pressure can the international community, though, bring to bear? And I'd just like to acknowledge the EU Foreign Policy Chief is sitting in the front row here.
Yeah,
at the
Borrell
Munich
is in my
Security
ear right
Conference.
now.
And I'm going to quote you, José Borrell, if you don't mind, because you said this in the past week. You made this thinly veiled call on the United States to cut arms supplies to Israel due to the high civilian casualties in the war. You said, if you believe that too many people are being killed, maybe you should provide less arms in order to prevent so many people from being killed.
So
is there a point there?
There's two things. We believe in the right of Israel to exist. That's fundamental, and it must be able to exist in peace and security. We also have a foreign policy all about human security. We're Canada. That's what we believe in. And the protection of civilians has been at the core of everything we've been doing. So, of course, right now, this is difficult balance. And on Rafah, we were absolutely clear. This is unacceptable because Palestinians have nowhere to go. But at the same time, we need an Israeli government that is willing to talk about the two-state solution. At the same time, we need the Arab world, and I know Ayman has been working a lot on that, on a PA reform. And Sarah, that was your conversation with the Prime Minister just beforehand. And we need, at the same time, to work on normalization of diplomatic ties and therefore of a security deal with Saudi Arabia and Israel, and eventually also the recognition by other states in the region of Israel. So if we can get there, and I think this would be a beautiful vision, we could have a different Munich Security Conference next year. But time is of the essence. We have a couple of months. Netanyahu cannot just continue to wage his war.
You have been in the center of negotiations at Livni. You support a two-state solution. You're also, you're in Israel. You see the trauma of October 7th, and the population is traumatized. There is no appetite right now for a two-state solution, or at least very little appetite. And so, and this is our final round of questions, by the way, so I'd just like everybody to perhaps have a last little final word here before we open it up to questions from everybody else. You've said that it will be difficult to convince Israelis to support peace, to support a two-state solution. Do you see any hope?
Yes, I see hope. It is true that Israel is under trauma, all of us also, personally. This kind of horrors you mentioned, and thank you for that, the hostages. They need to be released because they were taken. These are crimes against humanity. But speaking about two states or future, there is also a need to understand that also on the Palestinian side, there are those supporting the idea of two states for two peoples. We didn't reach an agreement, but they represent aspiration, legitimate aspiration of the Palestinians for a state. Hamas does not. Hamas does not accept the right of Israel to exist. And therefore, those that are speaking now about eternal peace with Hamas, they don't understand the nature. It's not just a terrorist organization for some freedom fighters. Gaza Strip could have been free if they had renounced violence. We left Gaza. We didn't want to be there. We don't want to control the Palestinian life. And therefore, for those of you here that not just, speaking in terms of slogans, but understand the complexity of the situation, also on the Palestinian side, there are those that are obstacle for peace. And Hamas is the main obstacle. Not only a terrorist organization, not only a jihadist group, not only a charter that speaks about killing Jews or Israelis living, and this is what they did. Not only promised to have more massacres in the future if they remain. And therefore, and as I said, I'm a political opponent on Netanyahu, but I support the war in Gaza. I support the strategic need to eliminate Hamas as a terrorist organization and as a regime, and hopefully, just to give one hopeful sentence, I know that there are negotiations now. The US, the Saudis, hopefully Jordan, Egypt, the PA. If this, and this is something can grip up, there's a need for us also in human rights to understand that the outcome of this can be secure. And I'm speaking about those supporters of two states, not all the Israelis support it, or not all parts of this government, but yes, for us, we need to understand that it brings security, we have a new security structure in the region with the Saudis, with Jordan, with others. And by having that, and there are change on realities also on Gaza, and this hopefully can make a change.
Manuel, Safadi, I'd like to ask you, first of all, for your response. Second of all, can you take us into some of these negotiation rooms and tell us particularly what regional players might be willing to provide to get a deal done? Because, for example, earlier this month, you met with your counterparts from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, and Egypt in this big meeting in Riyadh that we've been hearing so much about. We've been hearing one of the plans discussed, might provide security assurances, additional security to Israel, for example. What is potentially on the table to move not only from a ceasefire, but maybe also to a two-state solution, possibly also to another normalization agreement with Saudi Arabia and Israel in the region, for example?
Thank you, Sarah. First of all, I think the key thing is that this war has to end. This murder has to end. These war crimes have to end. That's the number one. That's the bottom line.
And what happens after?
I'll come to that. But for now, nothing can justify the continuation of the destruction of the livelihood of 2 million people. Nothing can justify attacking hospitals. Nothing can justify killing 12,000 children. Nothing can justify making 17,000 children in Gaza orphaned. This is unacceptable by any standard. Israel has crossed every moral, humanitarian, legal law that there exists. That's number one. Number two, again, we've got to frame things right. It is unacceptable, again, to keep beating around the bush and not to recognize that the problem is with Israeli politics, that Israel does not want to recognize the right of the Palestinian people to exist. Not only are they saying that, but they're doing everything that will render the two-state solution unviable. And facts speak to that. Again, look at how things have evolved over the past 10, 15 years. Every horizon for peace have been blocked by Israel. Dehumanization of Palestinians have continued. There's nothing left to give to the Palestinians. That is a fact, and we have to accept that. And when we talk about Hamas, what about the settler terrorism on the West Bank? When settlers go rampage Palestinian village, kill no, they're not in jail. No action has been taken. No significant action has been taken against settlers. Actually, settlers were armed by Israel. And yesterday, settlers killed Palestinian children. So we have to call things as they are. The root cause of the problem is that there's an occupation that the Israeli government is not willing even to admit and recognize. And this government
What's on the table from regional players?
I'll tell you that. What's on the table is a full peace. That is the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, and it's still on the table. full normal ties, full peace, full acceptance, but that cannot happen without ending the occupation and giving the Palestinians their rights. We cannot solve the conflict unless we recognize that there are 5 million Palestinians under occupation whose lives are totally hostage. Talk about Gaza now and the hostage deal. Israel is taking 2 million Palestinians hostage in Gaza. And I'm sorry, Israel did not end its occupation of Gaza. Legally, Gaza was still occupied. We say, okay, Israel got out of Gaza, but they besieged their borders, they besieged their skies, they denied the entry of anything into Gaza without the permission of Israel, and they say we freed Gaza. Gaza was an open prison even before October 7. Gaza was besieged. Now, in the last 10 days, do you know that only 43 trucks were allowed into Gaza of supplies, and those trucks were not distributed because Israel killed the police escort that was protecting those supplies. So people are starving. 500,000 people in Gaza right now are at the highest level of starvation. Gaza is facing famine. So we have to recognize that. Talk about incitement. Who's inciting now? When the Deputy Speaker of Knesset says we want to burn Gaza. What's on the table, again, for the hostage deal, by the way, I'm sure you heard the Qatari Prime Minister. Whoever wants a deal does not walk away from negotiations. Israel walked away from negotiations. Everybody knows that the first offer is always a maximalist offer. But you go for the first round and then you agree to send a delegation. And the next day you decide not to send a delegation. So that also shouldn't totally. I personally believe that this current Israeli government does not want a hostage deal, does not want this war to end. It wants to continue with this war because it wants to save the political of the Palestinians.
We have to open it up to allow people in the room.
And just one last thing, Sarah, on the table, again, is full peace in return for ending the occupation. And that's the only way to guarantee the security of Israelis, of Palestinians. And again, we want a region at peace. We want Israelis and Palestinians to live in safety and peace, but that can only happen if both peoples have their rights addressed. The Arab Peace Initiative spoke of full Arab guarantees for Israel's security. Israel has to do what's right and has to recognize that the Palestinians have a right to statehood, to freedom, and they're not human animals. They're people who deserve to live in dignity and freedom.
We're going to open it up to one comment from the audience. If people can just sort of raise their hands right now, we have to keep it very quick. You're probably seeing the time. Our panel is nearly over. Eilit Harel, Women Wage Peace. I'd like to ask you, please, if you can keep your question or your comment to 3 sentences or less.
I'll try, okay? I'm honored to represent Women Wage Peace, Israel's largest peace movement. Women Wage Peace, in partnership with our Palestinian sisters from the West Bank, Women of the Sun movement, has been advocating tirelessly for a diplomatic process with women participation that will deliver peace, security, equality, and hope for both sides. Since the catastrophic attack on October 7th, Israelis and Palestinians have experienced unimaginable pain, suffering, and loss of life of thousands of children, men, and women. One of them is our co-founder, Vivian Silver, that was murdered at her house at Kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th. As women, as mother, we bear profound responsibility to fight, first of all, for the release of Israeli hostage, to end this war, and to help the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. After years of the world deprioritizing this conflict, we see this crisis as an historic opportunity for change. However, we cannot afford to fail, as previous attempt had 2 fatal flaws. First, they were too narrow, with the United States leading on its own, rather than creating a multilateral process that enabled both sides to work with a contact group from Europe, United States, and the moderate Arab world as real stakeholders in negotiation. Second, they were too shallow. It involved only leaders, mostly men, talking to each other behind closed doors with no real engagement of civil society in general and women in particular. We, as member of the Alliance for Middle East, a network of 160 Israeli-Palestinian civil society organizations, demand to be engaged in any process toward peace and to persuade and convince their scared and traumatized society to participate and to deter the extremists. Now my question.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's unusual that I applaud her.
Thank you. What lessons are you willing to learn from past mistakes to ensure the success of the next diplomatic push? Thank you.
There was one interjection here. And please, 3 sentences or less.
I have a question for Tzipi. Is there any faction within the Palestinian leadership that believes in Israel's right to exist?
Yes. You should have asked Mohammed Shtayyeh, but I believe so. Yes.
Which one?
There was somebody here.
Okay, I'll wait until I get.
Yes, please.
We'll answer all the questions together.
Good morning. My name is Ilan. I'm Israeli, former ambassador to South Africa, and now a peace activist. My question is to the international community. I think it is high time for you to change course and get involved in our conflict with the Palestinians, because the discrepancy, the disparity between Israel and Palestine is far too big for us today to do it by ourselves. I hope you will take it as a message.
You could just pass the microphone behind you. Yes.
Thank you. I'm from China, a journalist with the CGTN. I do have two questions. First one, I want to go, the world has witnessed the unprecedented scale of death and destructions in the Gaza area in the past 4 months. I wonder, how do you guys believe Israel's military operation in the Palestinian area would leave Israel's international reputation to the world? My second question relating to China. How do you see a possible role for China in a potential long-term peace process between Israel and Palestine, and particularly in the post-war Gaza and the West Bank? And what could China bring to such a process that maybe the Western countries have not been able to or could not? Thank you.
Can I answer?
Right here. It's you.
I just want to quickly point out, I remember last year in the town hall when we were talking about the new Middle East and the opportunities that would come. I remember asking the question that could there be a vision for peace without the Palestinian question being resolved? And I think as we sit here today, we should be reminded of the fact, if we were to look, we have divided this world into algorithms. The Palestinians and the Muslim world is only looking at Palestinians as being traumatized. The price of one Israeli life to Palestinian has already been put in the international market as 1:30. And we are still only allowed one side of the globe to only feel the trauma of Israeli lives and the other side. So it's, I just want to ask you actually the question, because when you were constantly, asking the Palestinian Prime Minister about reform, about their governance structures, it felt to me like, what if you were to miem a person, tie their hands, almost injure them, then throw them in really high currents in the waves and ask them, why are you not governing properly? This is what, in some ways, the state of Israel has been allowed to do to the Palestinian people over the last 60 years, and then the questions are asked. So I think I agree with the Jordanian foreign minister, and I think every Arab leader, and let me please commend Mr. José Borrell also, because anyone who is out of the algorithms of tribalism and only be able to see the trauma of one side. So in order to get credibility, let me just say, I think everybody in the Muslim world almost has condemned what Hamas has did. The Muslim world is, however, waiting for people in the Western world to condemn Israeli atrocities. Being a state does not give you impunity to go against every principle. And just to end by saying that, look, there is the rules-based order, there is the ICJ, there is the United Nations Secretary General, and what is unprecedented about what is happening in the world, vis-a-vis this, just last thing, is that each one of them is speaking loudly and clearly as to what the world needs to do. It's just that we are not listening.
Okay, there was a question right here in the front corner. And again, please just a question if you would. Okay.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody. Morning, Your Excellency. Just Maha Yahya, I'm the director of the Carnegie Middle East Center in Beirut. Two questions. One small comment. Your Excellency, you were equating the freeing the hostages with humanitarian support for Palestinians. That's a violation of international human rights. The hostages have to be freed, absolutely. There's no question about that. But the humanitarian support for Palestinians should not be held hostage to that. So I think that humanitarian aid should be allowed into Gaza to people that are starving without worry, without it being held as part of a broader deal. The question, maybe you want to comment on that.
Yeah.
The second question, just very briefly, is on the two-state solution. Everybody's talking about the two-state solution. Oslo was about the creation of a two-state solution. That 20 years later, we're nowhere near that. In fact, we've gotten very far from that. When the Oslo Agreement was done, there were around, I think, 250,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank. Today, we're talking about 750,000 with bypass roads. Palestinian regions are now at the time the talk it was a Bantunistan with small Israeli settler pockets in the West Bank. Today, it's the other way around. It's the small Palestinian enclaves within a much larger Israeli network of bypass road. So the question is, how do we do it with that? How do we deal with that? And what are the steps? If the two-state solution is what we want to achieve, what are the steps moving backwards from that? That will get us there, and what's the time frame we're looking at?
I'd like everybody's final thoughts and perhaps a response to one of those questions. Choose the one that you would like to answer. We're officially in overtime. I want to be respectful also of everybody's time today. We'll begin with Mélanie Joly.
Yes.
And again, if we can all keep it concise.
So I don't remember what Ayelet was referring to Vivian Silver. Vivian Silver, who created her organization, is an Israeli-Canadian woman who was killed on October 7. And she believed in peace. I think there was a very sad irony that she was part of the people that were killed by Hamas on October 7. I believe that every single civilian lives, Israeli and Palestinian, are equal. And I think that this conflict has had proportions that are unacceptable. But I really believe, Sarah, and having spent so much time with Ayman, with Faisal from Saudi Arabia, with Tony Blinken, there's way more people agreeing at the international level on what needs to be done, and way more interest in putting pressure. The problem we have is we don't necessarily have dancing partners right now. And I think that is why the most preoccupying thing right now, which would allow the right political momentum, is a hostage deal and humanitarian aid. I agree, humanitarian aid needs to go in. We've increased our humanitarian aid. It's catastrophic what's going in Gaza. We just came out with a very clear statement with Australia and New Zealand about it. But I really think that we need to put pressure on Netanyahu. We need to do the difference between Israel and the Netanyahu government as well. We need to make sure also that we have allies in Israel to put pressure also on Netanyahu government. And that's his job, and we will support Ayman and Jordan and the King and all the Arab states. We need a reformed PA. Because right now, Hamas has too much legitimacy in the eyes of Palestinians that are too much suffering right now. So we need to be able to help them, to offer them, the people, a new generation of young Palestinian leaders that will be at the table to create this state.
Mr. Foreign Minister, your final thoughts.
It's very clear that the hope of the Palestinian people and the security of the Israeli people are completely interlinked, and we cannot escape to that. And the hope of the Palestinian people has a name, a Palestinian state, a realistic Palestinian state, and that means Gaza and the West Bank under one single Palestinian Authority, connected by a corridor with an exit to the sea and with its capital in East Jerusalem. And what we have to do is to help that. So for today is the immediate release of hostages and the permanent ceasefire. But for tomorrow, not for after tomorrow, for tomorrow is the Palestinian state. It's the only way in which both of them will have peace, security, and the whole Middle East stability.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask the EU Foreign Policy Chief if he perhaps wanted to add a comment following his countrymen and give us a little bit of insight on the EU level.
I'm friend.
No? Okay, no comment
Okay.
from Yusuf Farad. Okay, Tzipi, Livni,
Okay,
your
just-
final thoughts.
I just want to follow what you said to show the complexity of the situation, because Mohammed Shtayyeh spoke about 67 line. You are speaking about one Palestinian state with a corridor. This corridor didn't exist in 67, and as you know. So I'm trying to say that the complexity of the situation is more than just the slogans that some are using. But I need to give an answer to a question that I'm being asked, and this is the question about, toll of death. I mean, they've killed, butchered 1,200. What is happening in Gaza in terms of numbers is higher than that. And the real way for those, we want to judge it in a moral and legal perspective. And I'm not asking the world to turn a blind eye to what Israel is doing in Gaza. But judge us in according to your own moral and legal justice and legal system. Because the loss of life for Israeli and Palestinian, I mean, it's the same. We are not speaking about the nature of the grief. It's awful. But here you have those that target civilian deliberately, targets, killed, raped. This is who they are. Israel is a democracy. We are trying to avoid civil casualties. I was in the Israeli cabinet. I know how it works. So I'm not saying that you cannot ask questions or get the answers, but to make this comparison, it's immoral. You cannot compare these terrorists that are looking for children to kill to an army that tries to avoid civil casualties. And to your question about whether, listen, not all the Israelis are the same, not all the Palestinians are the same. You can find in Israel those supporting peace, supporting the idea of two states, and those that are completely against it, as you know, and some believe in greater Palestine between the river to the sea. Same in Israel, those believing in greater Israel between the river to the sea. I hope, and this is the only hope for Israelis and Palestinians alike, to find on both sides the leadership that understands that the best option for their own people is to find the way forward and to acknowledge the legitimate rights of the other side. And therefore, I'm using not just the word of two states, but two states for two peoples that gives an answer to national aspiration of different peoples. I negotiated peace. During these negotiations on the other side, the representatives of the PLO, Fatah, accepted the existence of the State of Israel. We didn't reach understandings on borders and other things. But I would like to say, since it was asked also about mistakes, in 2014, there was on the table an American paper. I think it was just and fair to the Palestinians as well. And unfortunately, no answer was given. So sometimes the choice between 0 or 100% of what you want gives you a 0. And I hope that both sides would understand the nature of compromises that are needed.
Mr. Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you. Look, first of all, Palestinians have rights. And we cannot just keep talking about Palestinians as having hopes and aspirations. They have rights. Those rights are embedded in international law. Those rights are embedded in humanitarian law. The rights of the Palestinians to exist in their own state, independent, sovereign, on June 4, 1967 lines with East Jerusalem as capital is something that is the only way to move forward. And it's not slogans, it's reality. And if we want to talk about what existed and what did not exist in the past, I think we'll be having a different conversation. Let's look at the future. The future that we seek in the Arab world is a future of peace for Palestinians, for Israelis, for everybody. To have that, Israel's legitimate concerns for security and others should be addressed. The Palestinians' right to freedom and statehood must be addressed as well. That's number one. Number two, we cannot continue to talk about what's happening in Gaza as if it's something that you could just look at and glance at and move over. No, there's a catastrophe happening in Gaza. Innocents are being killed. The Israeli army is killing children in Gaza, is killing women and children in Gaza, is destroying hospitals in Gaza, destroying schools in Gaza. And that has to be recognized. The Arab world did recognize the trauma of October 7. Israel has yet to recognize the trauma that has been brought on Palestinians day in, day out. Every day, hundreds of Palestinians are being killed. In Gaza, and by the way, on the West Bank, do you know that even before October 7, 2023 was the bloodiest year for Palestinians in over decades? That's before October 7. The number of Palestinians killed on the West Bank is the highest in decades. That is the policy of this Israeli government, which again has ministers that openly call for the killing and destruction of Palestinians. So that's the thing. So to move forward, I think we just need, this war has to stop, and the world has to stand up to its responsibility. There should be consequences. And again, to your question about reforms and others, the whole world now is saying the only path forward is two-state solution. The whole world is saying humanitarian aid should be allowed into Gaza. The whole world is saying civilians should be protected. And Israel has done none of that. And ask any Israeli. Israelis will only tell you what they don't want. Tell us what you want. Do you want the two-state solution or not? So I think that's how we frame the conversation. To move forward, again, the war has to end, and we need to start implement a plan that would realize a Palestinian state, and that will be the only guarantee of a future of peace for Palestinians and for Israelis.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there, and apologies to everybody that we've run over time. That concludes our panel. Thank you so much for our panelists and for all of you.
Thank you so much. The situation is